The following interview was conducted as part of the Price of Freedom project by the Madison County Military Heritage Commission to inform and enlighten young people and the community as a whole about the sacrifices made by those in the military on battlefields around the world. We wish to thank the Huntsville School System and the Lehigh Broadcast Center for their help in presenting this military heritage program. Hello, I'm Tom Kennemer. Welcome to our program. Today we'll be talking with U.S. Army veteran Rex Wilson. Rex is the recipient of the Bronze Star with Valor for exemplary courage under extremely hazardous conditions after he and members of his ordnance team removed unexploded enemy bombs from their base camp in 1967 Vietnam. Rex later served in the CIA and Army Special Forces. He was inducted into the Madison County Military Heritage Hall of Heroes in 2005. Rex, it's indeed a pleasure to have you with us, sir. Thank you for your time.
Pleasure's mine.
Before we talk about your military service, tell us a little about yourself. Are you originally from this area?
Tom, I was born in Iowa, old farm boy, tall corn. But I've lived in so many different places that Huntsville is now my home. So
I see. Tell us a little about your family. You're from a big family, right? I mean,
no, actually, my family is just my brother and I, and my dad, who was an FBI agent, and my mom, who was a nurse.
Now, your dad served in World War II, right?
That's correct.
And what did he do?
He was a PT boat skipper, Tom. He was in the same squadron as JFK.
Really? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And served
PT 109. I remember that number.
Yeah. And I can't remember my dad's PT number, but it was close, and they both served in the Pacific there together.
I see. Did he ever meet or recall meeting?
He did.
He
did. Yeah.
Okay.
He mentioned that.
I see.
Several times.
You mentioned just briefly, you moved around a lot, I think, when you were growing up because your dad was an FBI agent?
Yeah, J. Edgar Hoover, who was the director of the Bureau at that time, he felt that they needed to move around sort of like service people, and he was afraid that the mafia or somebody would get their clutches into them if they stayed very long anywhere. So we moved just like service people. I think I went to 10 schools before high school.
Wow, moved around quite a bit. Yeah. I know your dad was a big influence in your life because he served in World War II. You feel very strongly about that, I'm sure.
Yeah, and his dad, my granddad, served as a cavalry officer in World War I. He was a veterinarian, and so he was also a cavalry officer, and all those things, seeing those things in the attic and stuff at my grandparents' house, I mean that imbued me with a spirit of how the military family.
Yeah. Well, you had quite a background there.
Yep.
You sure do. Now, you became involved in the ROTC in school. Did your dad's service in World War II influence that decision?
Yes, I think it did because he was very proud of his naval service. He used to say he was a lieutenant in the Navy, which is like a captain in the Army, and he used to say there was 2 on the blue. That was that was the 2 stripes on his blue uniform. Yeah. So that did influence me on becoming an officer.
Now, you mentioned that you had a brother. Is that right? Was he in service as well?
Jim, my brother, older brother, he served in the Navy as well as my dad. He was a communications guy, and he served just pre-Vietnam, and he served in Hawaii and Guam. He served overseas too.
Yeah. Your dad, brother served in the Navy. Why did you decide to go in the Army?
Well,
wanted to be different, right?
I wanted to be different, but I always liked the commando idea, and that I could, kind of control my own destiny. If that ship went down, I was worried that it'd be a long swim home.
Right. Yeah. What was boot camp or officers training like for you, and where did you go through your basic training?
Yeah, when I was a junior in college, we went to our Army basic officers course at Fort Lewis, Washington.
I see.
And it was full of a lot of rah-rah stuff and a lot of physical stuff, but I was an athlete, and so the physical stuff didn't you know,
Yeah.
it wasn't much really, but I really did realize that that I wanted to be a military man.
Uh-huh. Let's go back a ways now. You moved around a lot, but where did you finish high school? I think, did you say Nevada earlier?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Reno, Nevada.
Okay.
And up until I moved to Huntsville, I lived the longest in Reno.
I see.
7 years.
Hmm.
And now I've been here for 20-some, so. But Reno High School was my last 3 years of high school. I went to ROTC and junior ROTC in high school, and then I went to the University of Nevada and graduated from there in ROTC.
I see. Rex, what prompted your interest in disarming bombs?
Well, Tom, during the summer camp of my junior year, where they show you all the different branches of the Army and different things that you can do, and most athletes, you're directed to go into the infantry or one of the combat arms.
Right.
Infantry, armor, or artillery. But I was so enamored with seeing the bombs blown up and doing that kind of stuff that I convinced the professor of military science and tactics that I wanted to be an ordnance guy and do the bomb disposal.
Got to have a lot of nerve to do that, I can assure you. When did you go to Vietnam? I mean, you were stationed at another place before you went to Vietnam. Is that right?
Yes, sir. Actually, my first assignment was here at Redstone.
I see.
When I finished EOD school,
Uh-huh.
and I'd already gone to jump school, I came down here and I was assigned to a range out by the river, a demo range, where we trained some of the ammunition handlers
Uh-huh.
in how to manage explosives.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was here when I volunteered to go to Vietnam in '67. March of '67 is when I went to Vietnam.
Yeah. Well, you have all your arms and enlisted. I mean, so you apparently knew what you were doing. But I'm sure that to be serious, you saw some injuries or even death involved in this.
I did, Tom. As everybody in any kind of combat zone, I mean, you see a lot of the worst of humanity.
Right.
But for me, I was so fortunate. You know, as it turned out later, I realized that it wasn't just me and my prowess at explosive disposal. I was being watched over by a higher power. So
You had some help.
yeah.
Were you in different parts of Vietnam, and if so, describe the areas you were in, Rex.
Yeah, I was stationed at Cu Chi. That's where my detachment. I had myself and 9 enlisted men. That was my bomb disposal detachment. And we were supporting the 25th Infantry Division there. Then I had another on-site base at Tay Ninh, where a lot of big battles were. And then I also had some people stationed down in the Delta, in Dong Tam. But during the 67, 68 period, when I was there, the Viet Cong used to target ammunition supply points.
Yeah.
And if they got in there and blew them up, then somebody had to come and clean them up. So they would bring EOD detachments or people from EOD detachments from all over the country for Marines, Air Force, all services. They would bring them together to those points. So I was up at one of those ammunition dump cleanups at on the beach at Duc Pho in not far from Da Nang.
Da Nang, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Okay. Talk about being away from home while you were in the military. How did it affect your family? And were you married at that time?
I wasn't married at the time, but over the years, my adventures and my zeal for overseas service and hot spots, it took its toll. I had 3 failed marriages before I met Alicia, my present bride.
When you had some free time when you were in Vietnam, however little that was, what did you do for relaxation? Do you have a chance to see any movies or anything like that?
They used to play movies almost every night in the base camp, so we had a chance to see them if we were around. And we got stereos and stuff, so we'd listen to some music too when we had some downtime.
Rex, you're always like around or close, nearby, combat. If you weren't in combat, just defusing bombs and so forth. But and you alluded to it just a little bit earlier. What was the countryside? Describe to our students what the countryside was like in Vietnam. It was really a beautiful country,
it's
isn't
a
it?
gorgeous country, as
Yeah.
you know.
Right.
The beaches are world class,
Right.
and that was one of the things that all of us used to say when we'd fly over those beaches or when we'd get down and work on them. You could tell these are world class beaches that people would pay to come to, and we were always saying what a wonderful tourist place Vietnam would be if there wasn't any war.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you didn't have email, you couldn't text anyone back at that time, but you
No.
were able to get regular mail from, I guess, from time to time. How often was that, and did you get a letter like pretty regularly, or how did that work?
Well, I tried to keep my family and friends at home writing to me, because when that mail call came every day when you were in base camp, you wanted to have something in that
Yeah.
from
that
that
was
bag.
important. That was
Yeah.
very important. Yeah.
But it usually took maybe 3 weeks to a month to get
Yeah.
an exchange
Mhm.
of letters, but it was nice to receive something from home,
Mhm.
care packages, or one of my favorite things was to have. Of course, we always had cold beer
Right.
in Vietnam, but one of my things was the Chuckles. You remember the Chuckles candies?
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Well, I used to
Yeah.
have a penchant for having Chuckles candies.
Okay.
And that's what I had with my beer when I got them from home.
But you're a big hit with your fellow EOD members there, right?
Oh yeah. They weren't so fond of the Chuckles.
Well,
But
but they like the beer.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And would you occasionally get to phone home? They had set up places at some of the bases that you could call home.
no,
You
we
never
didn't
did get to call
We
home?
didn't have that
Oh, I see.
during my time.
Yeah.
I think later on they did, but
Yeah. Rex, you were awarded a Bronze Star with Valor for your bravery while in Vietnam. Tell us about the combat action that led to you receiving this award.
well, it was just before Christmas.
It was 1967.
1967, and several of us were in base camp in Cu Chi, and we got a call, and we were like firemen, If we weren't called, we were preparing to be
Right.
called.
Yeah, yeah.
And when we got called, the calling unit would send us a helicopter and fly us to wherever they needed us. So we got a call from the 25th Division forward. They had a forward base set up in a place called Dao Tieng, which was near the Parrot's Beak, and this was a target for the North Vietnamese and Viet Cong coming into Vietnam from Cambodia. And it was a very unusual event. They saturated, after dark, the Viet Cong and the NVA saturated this base camp with mortars, mortar rounds, 82 mortar rounds, 82 millimeter. But many of them didn't go off. And so we were called to go and find the duds, what we thought were duds. And so initially what you have to do is you have to dig out the round to be able to see what it is. And if it hasn't detonated already, you dig it with a knife, and you probably remember what the laterite soil was like. It was like iron.
Right. Rex, give our students an example of the size of what this unexploded bomb.
Okay, well, a mortar, an 82 mortar round is about that long with the fins on it, and about that big in diameter. So the warhead, where the explosives are, is about this long, and the fusing is on the other on the end. And when they impact the ground, of course, the fuse, a lot of the fuses are designed to impact and detonate on impact.
Right.
But these didn't, they were something different. And when we dug out the first few, and there's so many different fusings that you have to be careful, because some are designed to detonate if they're moved. So we started digging the ones out that hadn't detonated yet, and we found these were a Chinese fusing that was chemical long delay. So the fuses were set to go to detonate anytime after impact from 4 to 8 hours. And so we had never seen them in Vietnam before. So this was something totally new. And I mean, we were there digging in the middle of the night, and we had the base camp looking for the impact locations.
Right.
And we realized that, you know, it was a tremendous hazard to be working on these things. They could blow up any time.
Right.
So we went to the places like the communications area where they were saturated. They would come through the floor, so we had to dig them out of the floor. And we focused on those first, and we sandbagged the others. And all night, as we were digging up these rounds, we could hear some of them exploding in different
Their
places
time
around.
was up. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Wow.
So it was pretty stressful. There were myself and 2 other guys on my team were there. We were working. Our hands were bloody from digging those things out of the soil.
And you were there how many hours? Or was it like all day?
Until dawn.
I see. I
Yeah.
see. And didn't lose anybody?
Didn't lose anybody.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
And Tom, that's one of my biggest. One of the things that I'm so proud of is that my team during the year that I was there. I mean, we had something like 1,400 different events that we had to neutralize.
Right. Right.
Explosive ordnance.
Yeah. Right.
Over that year, 1,400 and not a single injury in my team.
Fantastic.
I was so proud of that.
So did you suffer any wounds at all while you were in Vietnam?
No, no. I was
out.
one of the fortunate ones, and when you come back, you wonder how you came back unscathed when you see friends that lost a leg or were killed.
Yeah. Rex, you mentioned your dad earlier, but share with us what or who else prepared you to take the actions you did while in combat?
Well, I gave this a lot of thought when I saw your questions, and I think that the professor of military science and tactics, the guy that's in charge of the ROTC training detachment, was a Colonel Gundlach, and he was a real role model for me. And I guess the fact that we had a good communication was what allowed me to go into EOD, because otherwise I'd have been an infantry officer and probably wouldn't be here.
Right. It's a lasting impression.
Yeah. He was a great guy, and he actually went to Thailand, and while I was in Vietnam, he was in Thailand working with the MAG group there, advising the Thais.
I see. Okay. How would you describe to young people what it's like to serve in a war zone, the thoughts you have of possibly being killed or wounded during a battle? Always on edge, so to speak, you know.
Yeah, it's constant stress, and you really can't imagine what you're going to do except for your training. I mean, your training kicks in because you're trained to do certain things when certain things happen, and but you can't imagine what you're going to go through when you see the first combat. I mean, the fear is intense, and you have to make a decision inside that you're going to react in the proper way.
Nothing like you've ever seen before. Yeah.
It's a totally different experience, and after talking to my dad about it when I was younger, it was something that I wanted to know what that felt like.
You want to experience, yeah, I see. I know people often wonder, is it okay to be afraid or scared in combat? And we ask all of our veterans that same question. How would you answer that?
Yeah, of course you got to be scared. I mean, your life is at risk, and what you have to believe is that there's something stronger than yourself that you're serving, and that has to be your lift that gets you moving and keeps you going in the right direction.
Yeah. Rex, what are your thoughts on the anti-war protests that were going on back home when you served in Vietnam?
Well, of course, that was a very demoralizing thing for those of us who were over there. Of course, we didn't pay much attention to it because we weren't involved in it. We were involved in the day-to-day actions. So we would read it in the Stars and Stripes Army newspaper and stuff, and it demoralized us in a way, because those people who were doing those, they just saw a fraction of the picture. Mm-hmm. Most of them had never been overseas. They didn't see what we were trying to do. They didn't see, what at that time communism. It was a throwaway slogan to some of the protesters. Mm. But communism was putting so much of the world in chains, and we were trying to stop it. I mean, it was as simple as that. And I know that people going back over Vietnam and, saying that we shouldn't have been there, I firmly believe that what we were there for were the right reasons to stop what eventually did happen. And I was in Southeast Asia when it did happen, when everything started coming down. And the people that predicted the domino theory was never mentioned after the North Vietnamese and the communists took over all of Southeast Asia.
Well, like all those that served in Vietnam, we had a job to do. That was our country sent us over there, and we had a job to do,
and we were serving.
We were serving our country. After your service in Vietnam, you joined the CIA and actually went back to Vietnam and other hot spots around the world. Tell us about that experience.
Well, I came back to the United States after my first tour in Vietnam. I went to Fort Bragg. I was at Fort Bragg commanding an EOD detachment there. And that was during the period of the race riots and things like that. There were bombings. Here in this country, there were bombings that I had to go investigate for the FBI because at that time the FBI didn't have any real strong bomb techs. Right. So they would call on us to go investigate bombings and stuff. And so we were doing essentially the same thing. But when I got out of the service in October of '68, after my time was up, my dad, when I went to visit him in Reno, he held up two applications, one for the FBI and one for the CIA. He says, "Which one do you want?" And I said, "Dad, you can roll those up real tight and put them somewhere." But I said, I've got enough military service and service to our government, I think, right now.
Yeah.
18 months later, I said, "Here, give me that one."
You took the CIA.
I really, the feeling of service was so strong that I didn't feel right just working at a job.
And you went all over the world involved with the CIA, is that right?
Yeah, I was stationed I went back to Vietnam. I spent another year and a half there down in the Delta, and I was a special police advisor for the Vietnamese special police.
I see.
And then I came back to the States and was trained in Lao language school and went to Laos. And I was stationed in Pak Se, Laos, actually when the communists took over everything. I had to leave.
And that was what
that was 75.
75.
Yeah.
Okay. So you stayed in what 6-7 years in the CIA or involved?
No, I was in there 9 years and 4 months.
I see. You later became an officer in Army Special Forces. What led to that decision?
Well, that was another hiatus. After I left the agency from Turkey. I was stationed in Turkey in the embassy, and I was so fed up with our political administration that the only way I could protest was to leave. And so I left the agency there, and I came back to the States, and I did some things with some business things with a couple of friends, and then I got that itch again. And I said, I got to serve. And at that point, I tried to get back into the Army because I knew that eventually I wanted to be in Special Forces. I'd always known that. Since I met, in 1963, I met a Special Forces NCO who came back and talked to us.
At your ROTC class, or when you're in school?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I said, I want to be back in the Army. Well, the Army said, you're too old. So I said, well, I'm still a pretty fit, red-blooded American boy, and I said, I want to serve again.
How old were you at that time, Rick?
39.
39, okay.
So I said, no, I'm gonna serve, and I wrote a personal letter to the commanding general of the reserves, the U.S. Reserve System.
Okay.
And within a couple of months, I had orders to go to Fort Benning, because in order to get to Special Forces, I had to become a combat arms officer, which means I had to go to infantry training. So I went to the advanced course at Fort Benning, and then I went into Special Forces.
And you traveled around the world with the Special Forces too?
Yeah, I went to some 50 countries.
Wow.
In Special Forces, and different training missions and different things.
What rank were you at that time, or when you left the Special Forces?
When I left Special Forces, I retired as a lieutenant colonel.
Okay.
But my last 10 years in Special Forces, again, because I wanted to stay, and the Army has a rule: if you're 28 years if you're a lieutenant colonel with 28 years service, and you're not going to make full colonel, then you have to go out. So I found a way around that. I was still real fit. I said, I'm going to become a warrant officer. So for the last 10 years, I was a Special Forces warrant officer, a 180 Alpha, and I was doing the same things that I was doing back when I was a captain.
Wow.
So actually,
You were determined to stay in.
I was.
Yeah.
I was. Yeah. A little crazy maybe, but that was my life. It was.
So your total time, including Vietnam and CIA and Special Forces, what 28 years or around that
38,
time? 38 years. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Wow, and government service.
Yeah. Yeah.
Rex, what brought you to the Huntsville area?
Well, at the end of I was at the Pentagon in the Army Operations Center as a lieutenant colonel when Gulf War I happened, and so I worked there for 11 months, and after that, I was as a reservist. I was on active duty as a reservist, and after the war was over, I worked the reconstruction of Kuwait. I was in charge of a I was the organizer for a general officers committee that was overseeing the reconstruction of Kuwait, including putting out the oil fires.
Okay.
And I stayed for a year to do that, and then I was taken off of active duty, and I said, wow, am I going to stay in D.C.? Yeah. I don't think so. So I did a matrix, and a lot of my old retired friends from EOD were down here, so I said, I'm going to Huntsville.
And you remembered Huntsville from your earlier service here, yeah.
And Huntsville has always been a wonderful place for me to live, and so I said, I'm picking up and moving to Huntsville.
You and your wife run a successful travel agency here in town. Tell us how you got involved with that.
Well, all my life, Tom, I've been wanting to have some interaction with the travel business. And it's been on one of my, I'm a list guy.
Okay.
And it's been on one of my lists for about 30 years. And my language skills, the Army didn't teach me any language skills, but the agency taught me Spanish, French, Turkish, and Laotian.
Wow.
So all these things and my travels and knowing the cultures and stuff in those different countries just led me to say, oh, I got to be in the travel business. But I could never find a way. I wasn't going to buy my own travel agency, and you know, in the old days, you had to have a brick and mortar travel agency. So I never wanted to do that. And so when we had the opportunity to buy into a franchise, an online travel agency, we said, this is for us.
Perfect fit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, you and your wife have, is it 3 children and 8 grandchildren? Talk about that. I know you're proud
Well,
or happy to talk about.
Yeah, I never had any kids while I was in the previous marriages, but Alicia had 4.
I see.
So when I married, Alicia's a Panamanian, and I met her down in Panama City when I was stationed down there, and she was my Spanish tutor, and but we had a very long. She was giving me Spanish lessons, but we had no social contact whatsoever. And but I had so much respect for her and her family that then when I went back another time, then we started dating and became close and eventually got married. So we have the 4 kids, and all of her family now are here in the Huntsville area, and now we have 8 grandkids as well.
We got the whole group here now.
Yeah, and here's a guy that
Fantastic.
I never expected to have any grandkids. I never expected to live this long, you know.
Wow.
So it's a blessing.
What I want to get the name of your travel agency. What's it called?
Well, it's Why Boggle
Why Boggle?
Travel.
Okay. Give us the.
It's Y,
Okay.
the letter Y,
Okay.
Boggle Travel. And we rebranded back about 7 years ago because we wanted to take advantage of the Google kind of thing, you know, where you just make up a word.
Yeah.
And you make that word into a brand.
Yeah.
So that's the name of our company.
Makes sense to me.
Why Boggle?
Okay. Rex, what's your favorite memory from serving in the government all those years in Vietnam, the CIA? When you think back, what is one of your more prominent memories?
Well, the people. I mean, I had a special affinity for Turkey. I spent 2 years in Turkey, and just the people and being able to have, when you have the language skills, now you have a closeness with the people and you can connect on ways that you could never do otherwise. And I had such a wonderful time traveling in Turkey. It's like a microcosm of the United States. It's got mountains, it's got beaches, it's got areas that look like Iowa.
Wow.
You know, it's a wonderful place.
Yeah. And that leads to my next question. Of course, you know, you met a lot of people during, you know, your involvement with the CIA, Army, and CIA and Special Forces. Do you still stay in contact with a lot of those folks?
I stay in contact with a few. One of my old buddies gave me a call yesterday. He's coming down for a visit. We used to have pretty regularly we organized reunions, but
Yeah.
the guys are getting kind of long in the tooth now, and
Yeah.
not so many eager to plan.
You served during the war, and through the years, I'm sure you've seen a few war movies and TV movies depicting war. What do you think of those? Are they accurate?
The thing is, for me, no war movie can really be very accurate on an individual level, because when you're in combat, you only see the smallest, narrowest piece of that pie. You only see what's going on in front of you and to you while that action's going on. And only the generals and somebody in a helicopter or somebody watching from above can see what the battlefield looks like, but he doesn't see that little piece that you saw. So it's very difficult to put that in a movie, but it's complete chaos followed by silence, followed by chaos, and it's difficult to keep your equilibrium during that, and only training and a belief in some higher power will do that.
I think I know your answer to the next question with all your determination, but do you often wonder, would you do it all over again?
You know, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, there's no hesitation, no thought.
Yeah.
That my life has been so rich from the things that I've volunteered to do, and you know, so many times in life we teach kids don't volunteer for anything.
Right.
Well, for me, it was the doors opening to some tremendous adventures, tremendous connections with people that I would never otherwise.
Opportunities.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Rex, our final question here. What would you like for young people, especially our students, to learn and hopefully remember from your military and government-related experience?
Well, Tom, I think all of us who've served in some way in the military, or I think human beings, we need to serve something. To really have value, we need to serve something bigger than ourselves. And whether it's community service, whether it's serving your nation in the military, whether it's serving your nation in the Peace Corps, we need to learn to serve, and we need to serve Him. But service is something that's so powerful, because you have to get beyond yourselves, and this has become a very selfish society. I think we have to get back to where people live outside themselves. They don't always have to please themselves. They have to please something higher.
Get involved in something.
Absolutely.
Rex, thank you so much for participating in our Price of Freedom interview series and allowing us to preserve your military experience for the people of this community. And thank you, sir, for your service to our country.
And you for yours, Tom.
Thank you,
Thanks.
sir. If you'd like more information regarding this interview or any interview in our Military Heritage series, please contact the Madison County Military Heritage Commission website at mcmhc.org.